Hello YouTube, this is Matt Pullen, and I'm going to be presenting a game that I saw on chesspo.st. It was played in 2003 between Henrik Danielsen and Peter Heine Nielsen in the Dalum Papir Cup of that year. Henrik Danielsen, a grandmaster, is responsible for the Qxb2 YouTube channel, where he has uploaded several videos examining the theory of his F4 polar bear system. So you might recognize that name. It's another YouTube author. So in this game, he plays his trademark F4, and his opponent plays pawn to C5. Now, typically when pawn to F4 is played, the natural follow-up is knight to F3, bringing the knight to its best square behind the F pawn and strengthening white's control over E5. However, in this move, this game, Danielsen does not play this. He plays B3, and the logic behind B3 is that against knight F3, black might play G6. The reason he plays G6, he wants to get the bishop on a diagonal where it complements the c-pawn's control over d4. Because of the pawn on c5, the bishop might have a hard time getting developed, because the c-pawn blocks its normal scope of development. The bishop can't go to c5 or b4. So there's an argument that now the best square for the bishop is g7. And the next few moves might be e4, bishop g7, knight c3, knight c6. By transposition, this is the standard start of the Grand Prix attack Sicilian, where all of black's moves are focused on the d4 square, and for the short term, the bishop on g7 is not impeded. Black has yet to decide what to do with this knight on g8. It might go to f6, sure. It might also, after e6, go to e7, or it might go to h6. And but by playing b3, white is preparing to get his bishop onto the long diagonal, and discourages black from doing so. Because if black plays g6, then after bishop to b2, white has the threat on the long diagonal. So obviously black has to block this, so he has to commit to something like knight f6. And now it is white who has the bishop. Black, in the long run, can play bishop to g7 and then move this knight away and try and get the exchange of bishops. But white has gotten on the long diagonal first. If black wants counterplay, he can prepare that. But in the short term, it is white whose bishop controls the center. So yeah, that's why b3 was played. And black, he did not play g6, he played knight to c6. And after bishop to b2, d5, e3, and knight to f6. So black is setting up in a traditional queen pawn center. Pawns on d5 and c5 next to each other, both knights developed on the classical squares. Instead of knight to f6, I don't know, I might actually consider playing pawn to a6 here. Now, why would you play this move? It's not a developing move, but it prevents white's strongest developing move. I mean, how can this bishop develop with influence over the center? I mean, it can come to e2 or d3, where it really doesn't put any pressure on anything at this point. Or it can come out to b5, pinning the knight on c6, and in turn strengthening white's control over e5. So I think it might be worth it just to play a6 here. Simply, I mean, it's not a developing move, but it prevents white's strongest developing move, the bishop to b5, and forces white to put his bishop on a less active square. So just a little personal thought there. Knight to f6 was played in the game, and Danielsen plays bishop to b5. Again, this move is part of white's fight for the long dark square diagonal because it takes away a knight, which defends the e5 square. Now here, black could have played queen b6, which prevents the double pawn and puts the question to the bishop on b5. He could have played bishop to d7, which develops a piece and prevents the doubling of the pawns. But instead, he played g6, and his plan is that white has a strong bishop on b2, but black will play his bishop on g7 and eventually oppose it, possibly exchanging these pieces. So Danielsen captures right away on c6, before black gets a chance to defend it with a piece. And after b takes, knight f3. So finally, this knight comes to its best square f3, and white already has a strategy around the e5 square. So bishop to g7, both sides castle, and now white jumps in with knight e5 before committing his queenside pieces or his d or c pawn. Now here, black played queen to c7. There was a more active move here for black that Stockfish thinks gives black a small advantage, and we'll just look at that real quick. Stockfish likes knight to g4. Knight to g4, the idea is that we're exploiting the unprotected bishop on b2. This move is made possible by the fact that the white knight is now on e5. So what are some possibilities here? White can capture, attacking the queen, but after queen d6, black is threatening the bishop on b2 and also threatening to clean up this knight. So white can exchange, bishop takes, king takes, and now this knight, the only way to escape alive is to come out to e5. So knight e5, takes, takes, takes. And here material is even, but black has control over the center. His queen is very effectively centralized. And he has a bishop against white's knight. So this position is likely to favor black. All right, let's look at another. After knight g4, white could also play the knight to d3. This defends the bishop, but black can just exchange. Knight takes b2, and queen d6, preparing something like e5, or maybe bishop a6. Just to get the rooks connected and try for a push in the center. This knight on b2 makes a very strange impression. So knight to g4 is not played in the game. Instead, a more passive queen c7, to guard the c6 pawn, was played. And here, in this kind of situation, which I get this structure, for white, quite often actually, when I play the f4 Sicilian, with the double c pawns for black. And what I always try and do is I always advance my my c pawn, to blockade this pawn so it remains a weakness on c5, and then later on rearrange my pieces to to focus on the c5 square. Of course, this does create some weaknesses on the d file, but it is a dynamic drawback. Instead of c4, Danielsen just puts his knight on c3. It's hard to argue with a simple developing move. Of course, now this pawn on c5 is unrestrained, and black may try to advance it to trade it off and try and create some dents in white's pawn structure. So rook to b8 was played. It's the only half-open file that b has, so that black has, so that makes sense. And now here, white plays a move which looks a little bit strange. The queen seems like it's already on an important diagonal. Sometimes in these systems with f4, white will try some kind of an attack with queen e1 to h4. to swing the queen over to the king side. But no, that does not happen in this game. Queen c1, the objective to protect the bishop on b2. So here black played c4, and because this bishop is now protected, white can exchange. He takes the pawn on c4, and after d takes c4, he plays rook b1, contesting the black's b file. Now, why doesn't he take this pawn on c4? Well, this would be very bad for white, because if bishop to a6, developing move, pins the knight to the rook on f1, causes a lot of problems. If d3, then black can exchange on c4, and now rook takes b2, just removing the bishop on the long diagonal. White's position just collapses after queen b2, knight e4. The long diagonal for black has been unleashed, pinning the knight on c3, attacking it again. Black is going to take on c3 and achieve a position where his minor pieces have great squares that cannot be attacked by pawns, and will simply dominate white's extra rook. So rook b1 was played by white. He's in no hurry to take the c4 pawn. Bishop to e6, guarding c4, and now bishop to a1. The bishop is more or less committed to the long diagonal, and moving it to a1 gets it out of the way, because now the b file is fully open and contested by the rooks. So white he tucks his bishop on a1, and now white might have been preparing something like queen to a3, followed by rook to b2 and the other rook to b1, doubling on the b file. So instead of allowing this, black takes on b1, queen takes, rook b8, queen c1. For the time being, black has control over the b file. And the idea of queen c1 is to come out to a3 and get a nice uncontested diagonal for the queen. It would be nice if black could play something like queen a5 to prevent this, but has to worry about the c6 pawn dropping. So knight d5 was played by black, and now queen a3, knight b4, with the attack on c2. So queen a4 defending that. And now black plays what I feel is a very questionable decision. I think a better move would be to play f6, with the idea that we're kicking this piece away, which is very powerful at the moment. Also, the pawn on f6 limits the effectiveness of white's bishop, which is more or less committed to the long diagonal. So I don't see why f6. I mean, Stockfish thinks f6 is a good move. I don't see what play white has. Maybe he plays something like a3, with a counterattack on black's knight. But f6 looks like a good move. Instead, black just trades. He removes his fianchetted bishop for the knight on e5. True, the knight on e5 was powerful, but the arguments against bishop takes e5. First of all, we're giving white a bishop on the long diagonal, which is now uncontested. After f takes e, there's no black bishop which can combat the dark square bishop for white. Also, the capturing away, capturing into the center opens up the f file for white's rook. And also this pawn is, we'll see what effect this pawn has very soon. So c5 was played, and now knight to e4, white is moving the knight in and also unleashing the bishop on a1. So bishop f5. We'll see what plan black has very shortly. Knight to g5, bishop takes c2. Now this was black's plan. Black has 4 pieces working together to trap the white queen. However, the drawback of this, white now has 4 units that are cooperating in an attack on the black king. And this plan to trap the white queen is rather misguided, or maybe black miscalculated the tactics that white has here, based on opening the long diagonal for the white bishop. So here, white's queen is attacked. Danielsen ignores it. He plays rook takes f7, getting a heavy piece very close to the opponent's king. And already we see the rook on f7 can cooperate with the bishop on g7 if this e-pawn moves. So e6 is a very serious threat. For instance, after bishop takes a4, white can play e6. This is threatening a series of checkmates. They'll start with rook to g7 check. For instance, say black plays rook to f8 to try and contest the f-file. Now we have rook to g7 check. King h8 is forced because the rook is supported by the bishop on the long diagonal. And now rook takes h7 check, supported by the knight. King g8 and rook to h8 checkmate. The pawn is covering f7, the bishop is covering the long diagonal, and the rook is giving check. This is the first of many checkmates we'll see with this rook and bishop cooperating on the long diagonal. So knight d3, with the idea of getting to a dark square to block this bishop. Well, there's rook to g7 check, and now king to f8 would lead to knight takes h7 check, king e8, rook g8 checkmate, as this pawn is preventing the black king from leaving the first rank. What if the king goes to h8? Well, then there's just mate in one, knight f7 mate. The difficulty with black's position is there's no way to contest the long diagonal. I mean, black could put a pawn on c3, but white's bishop could just take it. Black could put a queen on e5, but white's bishop could just take that too. There's no square on the long diagonal that black can move to and be supported by another black unit. So this total domination of the long diagonal is what really struck me about this game. So bishop takes h4 was not played. Well, what about e6 here? e6 to blockade the e-pawn, so that white's bishop can't access the final squares in the diagonal. Well, after rook takes queen, bishop takes queen, rook takes pawn, material is actually even here. However, black has, he's got loads of problems. The bishop is attacked, this pawn's attacked, the white has domination over the 7th rank, black's king is not feeling very safe, and these c-pawns are rather weak. So this would have been a dominating endgame for white, and presumably, I mean, if black saw e6, he wanted to avoid this type of position, against a grandmaster. Okay, so the move played in the game was h6, removing one of the pieces that's attacking the black king. Fair enough. But now e6, again, that strong move which activates the white bishop on the long diagonal. Pawn takes knight, and now rook g7. Now the move played in the game was king h8. King f8 leads to a very quick fate after rook to h7. Rook h7 threatens, rook h8, checkmate, supported by the bishop on the long diagonal. This pawn takes this away. This pawn is blockaded, can't move. So there's really nothing that black can do about this. I mean, if he goes to c3, the white bishop will just take. If he goes to e5, the white bishop will just take. So this is another variation which emphasizes the domination of the long diagonal. In the game, King h8 was played, which just looks suicidal because it allows the discovered check. So rook takes, King g8, and now I mean, this is plausible to capture the just capture the queen, but no. Danielsen finds a knockout blow. Queen to e8 check. Black's forced to accept this queen sacrifice. Rook takes queen. Rook takes rook. The pawn takes this square away. Bishop is still dominating the long diagonal. So King h7 is forced, and then the final position in this game, Rook h8, checkmate. The only two remaining pieces cooperating in a beautiful checkmate attack against the black king. This game struck me as being completely awesome in the sense that I've never seen a better example of long diagonal domination in a chess game. Well, thank you for watching this presentation of Danielsen-Nielsen from 2003. I hope this inspires you to go and create some attacks on the long diagonal.